The searing Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Catherine Thomas stumbled forward, her parched lips cracked and bleeding, her once vibrant blue dress now tattered and coated with the fine desert dust that had become her only companion for the past 2 days. She had long since lost her hat, and her chestnut hair hung in matted strands around her sunburnt face. The year was 1876, and Catherine was certain she would never live to see 1877. Just one more hill, she whispered to herself, the words scraping against her raw throat. But she'd been telling herself the same lie since sunrise, and the vast, unforgiving landscape of the Sonoran Desert stretched endlessly before her. The stagecoach accident had left her the sole survivor, the driver and other passengers having perished instantly when the horses spooked and sent them careening down a ravine. Catherine had been thrown clear somehow, a miracle that now felt more like a prolonged death sentence as she wandered, hopelessly lost. Her vision blurred, the cacti before her doubling and tripling as she swayed. The sound of hoofbeats registered dimly in her mind, but she dismissed it as hallucination, another cruel trick of her desperate, water-starved brain. It wasn't until a shadow fell across her that Catherine realized she wasn't alone. "Madam, good Lord, what are you doing out here?" The voice was deep, concerned, and wonderfully real. Catherine tried to turn toward the sound but found her legs would no longer support her. As she crumpled toward the ground, strong arms caught her, cradling her against a broad chest that smelled of leather, tobacco, and horse. "Water," she managed to rasp. The stranger eased her down to sit in the sparse shade of a mesquite tree and reached for a canteen at his hip. "Easy now," he cautioned, holding the container to her lips. "Small sips or you'll make yourself sick." Catherine's trembling hands clutched at the canteen as the first blessed drops touched her tongue. The water tasted sweeter than any wine she'd ever sampled, and it took all her willpower not to gulp it greedily. "I'm Wyatt Vance," the man said, his voice softer now. "Ranch foreman at the Triple Creek, about 15 miles north of here." Catherine lowered the canteen, forcing herself to pause. Through dust-caked lashes, she finally got a clear look at her rescuer. He was perhaps 30, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. A well-worn Stetson shadowed his features, but she could see the concern etched plainly on his face. "Catherine Thomas," she replied, her voice slightly stronger. "I was traveling to Oro Grande when our stagecoach overturned. 2 days ago, I think. They've blended together." Wyatt's expression darkened. The marshal mentioned a stagecoach hadn't arrived. Search party's been looking in the wrong direction. He glanced around, scanning the horizon. "Anyone else make it?" Catherine shook her head, the movement sending a fresh wave of dizziness through her. "No." "I tried to. I couldn't help them." "You're lucky to be alive, Miss Thomas," Wyatt said, gently reclaiming the canteen. "Oro Grande's still a good 20 miles southwest of here. You've been walking in circles." Tears welled in Catherine's eyes, born as much from relief as from the realization of how close she'd come to death. "I have an aunt there. She's expecting me. I've come from Boston to—" She stopped, suddenly overcome with exhaustion. "Rest now. Questions can wait." Wyatt stood, towering above her. "Can you ride? My horse can carry us both to the ranch. It's closer than town, and you need shelter and food right quick." Catherine nodded weakly. "I can try," Wyatt whistled, and his paint horse trotted closer. In one fluid motion, he lifted Catherine, cradling her as though she weighed nothing at all, and settled her in the saddle before mounting behind her. One strong arm circled her waist, holding her secure against him. "Lean back if you need to," he murmured near her ear. "I won't let you fall." As they set off at a gentle lope, Catherine found herself surrendering to exhaustion, her body relaxing against the solid warmth of the cowboy who had materialized from nowhere to save her life. Her last conscious thought before darkness claimed her was that Wyatt Vance smelled like salvation itself. The Triple Creek Ranch materialized on the horizon like a mirage, but unlike the phantom water sources that had tormented Catherine in the desert, this vision remained solid as they approached. A sprawling main house of timber and stone stood proudly amid several outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse. As Wyatt guided his horse through the main gate, Catherine stirred against him. "We're here, Miss Thomas," he said, his voice a gentle rumble against her back. "You'll be looked after now." Their arrival drew immediate attention. A gray-haired woman emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on her apron, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm as she caught sight of Catherine. "Wyatt Vance, what in heaven's name found her wandering in the desert, Mrs. Holbrook?" Wyatt explained, dismounting in one smooth motion before reaching up to help Catherine down. "Survivor from that missing stagecoach. She needs water, food, and rest." Mrs. Holbrook's capable hands were already reaching for Catherine. "You poor child, come inside this minute, Samuel." She called over her shoulder. "Fetch the doctor from town." A young ranch hand sprinted toward the stables without question. "No need to trouble the doctor," Catherine protested weakly. "I just need rest." "Nonsense," Mrs. Holbrook declared, her tone brooking no argument. "You're half dead from heat and thirst. The doctor will see you, and that's that." Wyatt's hands remained at Catherine's waist, steadying her. "Mrs. Holbrook's right, Miss Thomas, and she's the best cook in the territory. She'll have you feeling human again in no time." Catherine tried to smile, but her cracked lips made it a painful effort. "Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." "Staying alive would be payment enough," Wyatt replied, his gray eyes surprisingly gentle for a man whose weathered face and calloused hands spoke of a hard life. "The desert claims too many as it is." As Mrs. Holbrook led her toward the house, Catherine glanced back at Wyatt, who stood watching them, his hat now in his hands. "You'll come check on me?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his rugged features. "Count on it, Miss Thomas." Inside, the ranch house was blessedly cool, furnished simply but comfortably. Mrs. Holbrook, who introduced herself as Margaret, the housekeeper, led Catherine to a bedroom at the back of the house. "The master's away on business in Tucson," she explained, "but Mr. Reed would be the first to offer hospitality in such circumstances." "Mr. Reed is the owner?" Catherine asked, sinking gratefully onto the edge of the bed. "Yes, Mr. Daniel Reed. Finest man in the territory, though he keeps to himself since his wife passed 3 years ago." Margaret busied herself pouring water from a pitcher into a basin. "Now, let's get you cleaned up before the doctor arrives." With gentle efficiency, Margaret helped Catherine remove her ruined dress and washed away the desert grime. She produced a nightgown and robe that were slightly large on Catherine's frame. "These belonged to Mrs. Reed," Margaret explained. "She was a bit taller than you, but they'll do until we can salvage your things." Wrapped in the borrowed clothes, Catherine felt a strange connection to the unknown woman who had once called this place home. "You've all been so kind," she murmured, emotion threatening to overwhelm her as the reality of her narrow escape sank in. "There now," Margaret soothed, guiding her to lie back against the pillows. "Rest a bit. I'll bring some broth shortly, nothing too rich for your stomach just yet." Left alone, Catherine closed her eyes, intending only to rest them for a moment. Instead, exhaustion pulled her under into a deep sleep filled with fragmented dreams of burning sand, endless skies, and stormy gray eyes that promised safety. She awoke to the gentle touch of a cool cloth on her forehead and the murmur of voices nearby. Opening her eyes, she found an elderly man with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair seated beside her bed, with Wyatt standing at his shoulder. "Ah, you're awake," the older man said. "I'm Dr. Harrison." "How are you feeling, Miss Thomas?" "Better," Catherine replied, though her voice was still weak. "How long have I slept?" "Nearly 5 hours," Wyatt answered. "Doc says you're suffering from heat exhaustion and dehydration, but you'll recover fully with rest and care." Dr. Harrison nodded. "You're a fortunate young woman, another day in that desert without water." He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. "I've left instructions with Mrs. Holbrook," the doctor continued, packing his bag. "Plenty of fluids, light meals for a few days, and complete rest for at least a week." "A week?" Catherine sat up too quickly, wincing as her head protested. "But I must get to Oro Grande. My aunt is expecting me." "I've already sent word to town," Wyatt interjected. "Ask the sheriff to notify your aunt that you're safe and recovering here. Once you're well enough, I'll personally escort you to Oro Grande." The doctor rose, patting Catherine's hand. "Listen to this young man, Miss Thomas. He may look like just another cowboy, but he knows this land better than anyone, if he hadn't found you when he did." He shook his head. "I'll check on you in a few days." After the doctor departed, Wyatt lingered, shifting his hat in his hands. Without the immediate crisis, an awkwardness seemed to settle between them. "Thank you again," Catherine said softly. "I wish I had the words to express my gratitude properly." Wyatt's gaze met hers, direct and unwavering. "No thanks needed, anyone would have done the same." "Perhaps," Catherine replied, "but it wasn't anyone, it was you." A faint flush colored his tan cheeks. "I should let you rest. Mrs. Holbrook will bring your supper soon." As he turned to leave, Catherine called after him, "Will you tell me about Triple Creek Ranch tomorrow? And about Arizona Territory, I know so little of this place." Wyatt paused in the doorway, a smile touching his lips. "I'd be happy to, Miss Thomas. Sleep well." Over the next several days, Catherine's strength gradually returned under the attentive care of Mrs. Holbrook, who insisted on feeding her hearty stews, fresh bread, and medicinal teas. True to his word, Wyatt visited daily, often bringing small gifts, a book from the ranch library, wildflowers from the creek bank, or once, amusingly, a tiny horned toad he'd found near the corral. "They bring good luck," he explained as the creature blinked serenely from his palm. "At least that's what the Apache believe." Catherine leaned forward to examine the peculiar reptile, charmed by its prehistoric appearance. "It's quite beautiful in its way." "Like many things in the desert," Wyatt agreed, his eyes lingering on her face a moment too long before he glanced away. By the fourth day, Catherine felt strong enough to leave her room. Mrs. Holbrook had salvaged what she could of Catherine's belongings and altered one of Mrs. Reed's day dresses to fit her smaller frame. "The blue brings out your eyes," Mrs. Holbrook approved as Catherine examined her reflection in the mirror. "Though you're still too thin. Another week of my cooking will fix that." "I can't impose on Mr. Reed's hospitality much longer," Catherine protested. "I should continue to my aunt's as soon as possible." "Nonsense," Mrs. Holbrook waved away her concern. "Mr. Reed sent a telegram yesterday saying he's pleased to offer his home as long as needed. Besides," she added with a knowing smile, "I haven't seen Wyatt take this much interest in anything besides horses in all the years he's worked here." Catherine felt a blush warm her cheeks, but didn't deny the implication. There was something about Wyatt Vance that intrigued her, his quiet competence, his unexpected gentleness, the way his eyes seemed to take in everything around him with careful consideration. That afternoon, Wyatt offered to show her the ranch grounds if she felt up to a short walk. The late October air was cool but pleasant, the brutal summer heat finally giving way to Arizona's gentler autumn. "Triple Creek is one of the largest cattle operations in the territory," Wyatt explained as they strolled slowly toward the main corral. "Mr. Reed runs nearly 2,000 head on 30,000 acres. It's beautiful land," Catherine observed, taking in the rugged mountains in the distance and the expanses of scrubland dotted with mesquite and palo verde trees. "Different from anything I knew in Boston, but beautiful in its own right." "What brought you all the way from Boston to Oro Grande?" Wyatt asked. "It's not exactly a common destination for Eastern ladies." Catherine's expression sobered. "My father passed away 6 months ago. After Mother died when I was young, it was just the two of us. He was a professor of literature at Harvard." She smiled faintly at Wyatt's impressed look. "When he died, I discovered our financial situation was more precarious than I'd realized. The house had to be sold to settle his debts." "I'm sorry," Wyatt said softly. "My Aunt Charlotte, my mother's sister, has lived in Oro Grande for 20 years. She married a mine owner who passed away some years ago but left her comfortably situated. She wrote offering me a home with her," Catherine sighed. "I had few other options." Wyatt leaned against the corral fence, watching a young ranch hand working with a spirited colt. "And how do you feel about that arrangement now?" "Truthful, I'm not certain." Catherine joined him at the fence. "I'm grateful for Aunt Charlotte's generosity, but I've never been dependent on anyone. Father raised me to be self-sufficient. I taught piano and French to supplement our income in Boston. Those skills might not find much demand in Oro Grande," Wyatt acknowledged with a hint of a smile. "It's a growing town, but still rough around the edges. The silver mines bring in wealth, but also their share of trouble." "What about you?" Catherine asked, turning to study his profile. "Have you always been a cowboy?" Something flickered across Wyatt's face, a shadow of an old pain. "Not always. I grew up in Missouri. My father had a small horse farm. I learned riding and training from him." He paused, seeming to debate whether to continue. After the war, things were difficult. I drifted west, worked ranches in Texas, New Mexico, finally settled here 5 years ago when Mr. Reed offered me the foreman position. The war changed many things, Catherine said softly, thinking of the haunted young men who had returned to Boston, so different from the eager boys who had marched away. That it did, Wyatt agreed simply. After a moment of silence, he straightened. Would you like to see the horses? We've got some of the finest stock this side of the Mississippi. As they walked toward the stables, Catherine was acutely aware of Wyatt's presence beside her, the careful way he shortened his stride to match hers, how his hand hovered near her elbow when they traversed uneven ground, the quiet respect with which he introduced her to the ranch hands they encountered. In the cool dimness of the stable, Wyatt showed her his personal mount, the paint horse that had carried them both to safety. "This is Thunder," he said, as the horse nudged his shoulder affectionately. "Best cutting horse I've ever trained." Catherine reached out to stroke the horse's velvety muzzle. "He's magnificent, and apparently he knows it." Wyatt laughed, the sound warming the space between them. "He's earned the right to his pride." His expression grew more serious. "Catherine, Mr. Vance." A young ranch hand burst into the stable, breathing hard. "Riders coming in fast from the north pasture. Ben Williams says there's rustlers hitting the herd." Wyatt's demeanor changed instantly, the relaxed tour guide replaced by the authoritative ranch foreman. "Get the men," he instructed sharply. "And rifles from the gun cabinet." He turned to Catherine, his expression conflicted. "I'm sorry, go," she urged. "I can find my way back to the house." He nodded once, then strode away, calling orders to the men gathering in the yard. Catherine watched from the stable doorway as Wyatt and 6 hands mounted quickly and galloped off toward the northern boundary of the ranch, dust billowing behind them. Mrs. Holbrook was waiting anxiously on the porch when Catherine returned to the main house. "Rustlers again," she fretted. "Third time this month. That Blackwater gang's getting bolder." "Blackwater gang?" Catherine questioned as they went inside. "Outlaws who have been terrorizing ranches across the territory," Mrs. Holbrook explained, busying herself with preparing coffee. "Their leader, Jake Blackwater, used to work for the railroad until he killed a foreman in a dispute. Been on the run for 2 years now, gathering other desperados to his cause." She shook her head. "The law can't seem to catch them." Catherine tried to focus on helping Mrs. Holbrook prepare supper, but her thoughts kept straying to Wyatt and the men riding into potential danger. The afternoon stretched into evening with no word from the northern pasture. As darkness fell, Mrs. Holbrook lit lamps and paced the kitchen. "They should have returned by now," she worried aloud. Just as Catherine was about to suggest they send someone to investigate, the sound of approaching horses broke the tense silence. They rushed to the porch where the returning riders were dismounting in the yard. Catherine's heart clenched when she saw one man being supported between 2 others. "Mrs. Holbrook," Wyatt called, swinging down from Thunder, "prepare a bed, Carlos took a bullet." In the flurry of activity that followed, Catherine found herself pressed into service, boiling water and tearing clean sheets into bandages while Mrs. Holbrook prepared her medicinal supplies. The injured man, a young Mexican cowhand, was carried into the bunkhouse where Mrs. Holbrook set about cleaning and bandaging his shoulder wound. "The bullet went clean through," she reported. "If infection doesn't set in, he should recover." It was nearly midnight before Catherine found a moment alone with Wyatt, who sat at the kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee, his face drawn with fatigue. "What happened?" she asked softly, placing a plate of food before him. "Blackwater and his men were driving off about 50 head, Wyatt explained, rubbing a hand over his face. "We caught them at the North Ridge. There was gunfire. Carlos was hit early on." He sighed heavily. "We managed to recover the cattle, but the gang escaped into the canyons." "It's too dangerous to follow them at night." Catherine sat across from him, noticing a tear in his shirt sleeve and a smear of blood. "You're hurt." "Just a graze," he dismissed. "I've had worse shaving." Without asking permission, she took his arm and pushed up the sleeve to reveal a shallow gash across his upper arm. "This needs cleaning," she stated firmly. Too tired to argue, Wyatt submitted to her ministrations as she washed the wound and bandaged it with gentle hands. You're good at this, he observed, watching her work. Father was often ill in his later years, she explained. I learned to be something of a nurse. When she finished, their eyes met across the small distance between them. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of how quickly their lives had become intertwined. You should rest, she said finally, breaking the silence. It's been a long day, Wyatt nodded, rising from the table. At the door he paused. Catherine, he said, her name soft on his lips. I'm glad you're safe here. Long after he'd gone, Catherine remained at the kitchen table, her mind replaying the events of the day and the strange twist of fate that had brought her to Triple Creek Ranch. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt a sense of purpose and possibility stirring within her. The next morning brought a flurry of activity to the ranch. The sheriff arrived from Oro Grande with 2 deputies to take statements about the rustling incident. Catherine watched from the parlor window as Wyatt walked the lawman through what had happened, his manner calm and authoritative as he pointed toward the northern ridge. A light tap on the door drew her attention. Miss Thomas, you have a visitor, Mrs. Holbrook announced. A woman in her 50s entered the parlor, elegantly dressed in a traveling suit that spoke of considerable means. Her graying auburn hair was arranged fashionably beneath a feathered hat, and though time had softened her features, Catherine immediately recognized her mother's eyes looking back at her. Aunt Charlotte, she breathed, rising to her feet. Charlotte Thomas Davis crossed the room in quick strides, embracing Catherine with surprising strength. My dear girl, when word reached me about the stagecoach accident, I feared the worst. Then to hear you'd been wandering the desert. She pulled back to examine Catherine critically. You're pale and thin, but alive, thank God. I'm recovering well, Catherine assured her. Everyone here has been extraordinarily kind. So I see, Aunt Charlotte replied, her gaze moving to the window where Wyatt still stood conversing with the sheriff. The young foreman in particular, I'm told. Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. Mr. Vance saved my life, and I shall be eternally grateful to him for that, her aunt said smoothly. But now that I'm here, we can make arrangements for your transfer to Oro Grande. My home is prepared for your arrival, and you'll find the town quite civilized, despite its frontier location. Something like disappointment settled in Catherine's chest. Dr. Harrison advised at least a week of rest before I travel again. Nonsense. My carriage has excellent springs, and it's less than half a day's journey. Charlotte patted her hand. Besides, a young woman staying unchaperoned at a ranch full of cowboys is hardly proper, regardless of the circumstances. Mrs. Holbrook has been a most attentive chaperone, Catherine protested, though she knew her aunt's concern was not entirely misplaced. Boston society would certainly be scandalized by her current living arrangement. I'm sure she has, but appearances matter, Catherine, even in the territory. Charlotte's expression softened. I've waited months to welcome you to my home. Surely you understand my eagerness. Before Catherine could respond, the parlor door opened again, admitting Wyatt and the sheriff. The older man removed his hat, revealing a weathered face beneath silver-streaked dark hair. Miss Thomas, he said with a polite nod, I'm Sheriff Robert Taylor, glad to see you recovering from your ordeal. Thank you, Sheriff, Catherine replied. Mrs. Davis, Wyatt acknowledged Catherine's aunt with a slight bow. I see you've reunited with your niece. Indeed, Mr. Vance, and I was just explaining that I'll be taking Catherine home to Oro Grande today. Wyatt's expression remained neutral, but Catherine noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. Dr. Harrison recommended Miss Thomas rest here for at least another few days. With all due respect to the doctor, Charlotte replied, her tone cooling, my niece's proper place is with family. I have a comfortable home and access to Oro Grande's finest physician should she require further care. Sheriff Taylor cleared his throat, seemingly sensing the tension in the room. Actually, Mrs. Davis, I'd advise against travel today. The Blackwater gang is still in the area, and I can't guarantee safe passage on the Oro Grande Road until my deputies and I conduct a proper search of the canyons. Surely you could provide an escort, Charlotte pressed. My men and I are heading north to coordinate with the federal marshal, Taylor explained apologetically. We believe Blackwater may be planning something bigger than cattle rustling. A flicker of genuine concern crossed Charlotte's face. I see. I would be happy to escort both you and Miss Thomas to town once the doctor deems her fit to travel and the sheriff gives his approval, Wyatt offered. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay here at Triple Creek as Mr. Reed's guest. Charlotte hesitated, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she sighed. Very well, I suppose a few more days won't make a difference after months of separation. She turned to Catherine, but I insist on staying to provide proper chaperoning. Relief washed through Catherine, though she carefully kept her expression composed. Of course, Aunt Charlotte, I'm sure Mrs. Holbrook can prepare a room for you. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine observed with quiet amusement the effect her aunt had on the ranch household. Charlotte Thomas Davis was clearly accustomed to managing her environment, and within hours she had rearranged the parlor furniture to improve conversation flow, offered suggestions on the evening menu, and engaged Mrs. Holbrook in a detailed discussion of the latest Eastern fashions. To her credit, Mrs. Holbrook handled the subtle takeover with good grace, perhaps recognizing in Charlotte a kindred spirit when it came to maintaining proper standards despite frontier limitations. After supper, Catherine managed to escape to the front porch, seeking a few moments of solitude. The setting sun painted the desert landscape in shades of gold and crimson, the beauty of it still new enough to take her breath away. Your aunt is quite a force of nature, Wyatt's voice came from the shadows at the end of the porch. Catherine turned to find him leaning against a post, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. She means well, Catherine replied. She's been alone for many years. I think she's eager to have family near again. Wyatt moved closer, coming to stand beside her at the railing. You'll be leaving soon, then? It wasn't a question, but Catherine answered anyway. Yes, I suppose I will. She hesitated, then added, though I find myself surprisingly reluctant. Oh, a note of something hope perhaps colored his voice. I've come to appreciate the quiet beauty of this place, she said, gesturing toward the vast landscape before them. And the people here have shown me genuine kindness without the artifice I was accustomed to in Boston society. Is that all? Wyatt asked softly. Catherine turned to face him fully, gathering her courage. No, she admitted. That's not all. For a long moment they stood in silence, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then from inside the house, Charlotte's voice called, Catherine, where have you disappeared to? The moment broken, Catherine stepped back. I should go in. Wyatt nodded, his disappointment visible even in the fading light. Of course. But perhaps, Catherine suggested, her heart beating rapidly, we might continue this conversation tomorrow. I'd like to see the creek that gives the ranch its name before I leave. A slow smile spread across Wyatt's face. I'd be honored to show you, Miss Thomas. As Catherine rejoined her aunt inside, she felt a flutter of anticipation for the morning to come. Along with the growing certainty that her life had irrevocably changed the moment Wyatt Vance had found her in the desert. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect late October day in the Arizona Territory. Catherine dressed carefully in the borrowed riding skirt and blouse Mrs. Holbrook had altered for her, pinning her hair more practically than fashion might dictate for a morning ride. Charlotte observed these preparations with a knowing eye over breakfast. Mr. Vance has offered to show you the creek, I understand. Yes, Catherine replied, trying to keep her tone casual. Since I'm to be leaving soon, I thought I should see more of the ranch that has provided such generous hospitality. Catherine, her aunt said gently, setting down her teacup. I recognize that look. I wore it myself once, long ago. Surprised by her aunt's perceptiveness, Catherine felt a blush warm her cheeks. I don't know what you mean. Charlotte's smile held a hint of sadness. Your mother had the same inability to lie convincingly. It's the Thomas women's curse. She reached across the table to touch Catherine's hand. Be careful with your heart, my dear. The territory can be a harsh place for an Eastern woman. I know this all too well. Did you regret coming west? Catherine asked, genuinely curious about the aunt she barely knew. Charlotte's gaze turned distant. No. I loved George with my whole heart, and he loved me. Our years together were worth whatever comforts I left behind. Her focus sharpened again on Catherine. But not all frontier men are like my George. Some see Eastern women as novelties or means to respectability. Wyatt isn't like that, Catherine said with quiet certainty. Perhaps not, Charlotte conceded. But consider carefully what life would mean here, so far from everything familiar. The luxuries you took for granted in Boston are rare treasures in Oro Grande, and practically non-existent on a cattle ranch. Before Catherine could respond, Mrs. Holbrook entered to announce that Wyatt was waiting with the horses. With a meaningful glance from her aunt following her, Catherine went outside to find Wyatt standing in the yard holding the reins of two saddled horses, Thunder and a gentle-looking chestnut mare. "Good morning," he greeted her, his smile warming his typically reserved features. "I thought you might enjoy riding Penny here. She's even-tempered but spirited enough to be interesting." "She's beautiful," Catherine said, approaching the mare and offering her hand for the horse to sniff. "Though I should warn you, my riding experience is limited to proper ladies' saddles in Boston parks." Wyatt's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Penny will take good care of you, and I promise to keep our pace reasonable." With surprising grace, Catherine allowed Wyatt to help her mount, adjusting quickly to the western saddle. Once she was settled, Wyatt swung easily onto Thunder's back, and they set off at a walk toward the eastern boundary of the ranch. The morning air was crisp and clean, scented with sage and the subtle perfume of late-blooming wildflowers. As they rode side by side, Catherine found herself relaxing into the rhythm of Penny's smooth gait, the tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying slowly unwinding from her shoulders. "You're a natural," Wyatt observed as they traversed a gentle slope. Catherine laughed, the sound carried away by the breeze. "I think Penny deserves all the credit, but thank you, I'm enjoying this more than I expected." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the vast landscape unfolding around them in rolling hills and distant mesas. Occasionally, Wyatt would point out features of interest: a hawk circling overhead, a cluster of prickly pear cactus heavy with fruit, the tracks of coyotes and jackrabbits in the sandy soil. "It's so alive," Catherine marveled. "When I was lost, the desert seemed empty and hostile. But seeing it through your eyes, I realize how much I missed." "It takes time to learn how to see what's really here," Wyatt replied. "Most newcomers notice only the harshness and the danger, but there's beauty and abundance too if you know where to look." As they crested a small rise, a verdant ribbon appeared in the distance, marking a dramatic contrast to the surrounding arid landscape. "Triple Creek," Wyatt announced, guiding Thunder toward the oasis. "Three separate springs join together here, creating a year-round water source. It's what makes this ranch possible." They dismounted in a grove of cottonwood trees whose leaves rustled golden in the breeze. Wyatt secured the horses, then offered Catherine his hand as they made their way down to the creek bank. The water ran clear and swift over smooth stones, the sound of it a soothing melody against the backdrop of occasional birdsong. "It's beautiful," Catherine said softly, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell of the place. "Like something from a storybook." Wyatt led her to a fallen log that served as a natural bench overlooking a quiet pool. "This is my favorite spot on the ranch," he confided. "When things get too hectic or decisions weigh heavy, I come here to think." "And what decisions weigh on you now, Mr. Vance?" Catherine asked, sensing something beneath his calm exterior. Wyatt met her gaze directly. "Whether I should speak what's in my heart to a woman I've known less than a week." Catherine's breath caught. "Some would say that's not enough time to know one's mind." "Perhaps not," he agreed. "But out here, we learn to trust our instincts. Life and death can hang in the balance of a single decision." "And what do your instincts tell you?" Catherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Wyatt turned slightly to face her more fully, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "They tell me that finding you in the desert wasn't chance, that in those few days since, I've come to admire not just your beauty, but your courage, your quick mind, your kindness." He took a deep breath. "I know you have plans to live with your aunt, to rebuild your life in Oro Grande. I wouldn't presume to interfere with those plans, but I would very much like the chance to court you properly if you're willing." Joy bloomed in Catherine's chest, but caution tempered her response. "My aunt warned me this morning about the harshness of territory life for an Eastern woman." "She's not wrong," Wyatt acknowledged. "It's a demanding life, especially on a ranch. The work never ends, luxuries are few, and nature can be as cruel as it is beautiful." His hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the log between them. "But there are compensations too. a sense of purpose, freedom from society's more suffocating expectations, and the possibility of building something meaningful together. The warmth of his calloused hand on her sent a flutter through Catherine's chest. "I find myself thinking of possibilities I never considered in Boston," she admitted. "Before my father's death, my life seemed predictable: teaching, perhaps eventually marrying some suitable professor or businessman, maintaining a respectable but constrained existence." She turned her hand beneath his so their palms met, fingers intertwining. "The desert nearly killed me, but in a strange way it also awakened me. I don't want to simply exist anymore, Wyatt. I want to truly live." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the desert, warming, illuminating, full of promise. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Wyatt leaned closer. Catherine met him halfway, her heart racing as their lips touched in a kiss as gentle as it was profound. When they finally parted, Wyatt's storm-gray eyes held a new light. "I should probably take you back before your aunt sends a search party," he said, though he made no move to release her hand. Catherine laughed softly. "Probably, though I find myself suddenly reluctant to return to civilization." "There will be other days," Wyatt promised, helping her to her feet. "If you'll allow it." As they rode back to the ranch, Catherine felt as though the landscape had transformed yet again, no longer the deadly trap it had seemed when she was lost, nor merely the stark beauty she had admired from the safety of Triple Creek. Now it felt like possibility itself, vast and challenging, but also filled with unexpected joy. At the ranch, they found an unexpected flurry of activity. A stagecoach stood in the yard, and several ranch hands were loading trunks and valises onto its roof. "What's happening?" Catherine asked as they dismounted. Mrs. Holbrook emerged from the house, her expression troubled. "Your aunt has decided to return to Oro Grande immediately. A messenger arrived from town. Apparently there's been a fire at her home." Alarmed, Catherine hurried inside to find Charlotte directing the packing of their few belongings, her face drawn with worry. "Aunt Charlotte, what's happened?" Her aunt turned, relief washing over her features. "Oh, Catherine, there you are. We must depart at once. Sheriff Taylor sent word that there was a fire at my home last night. It's contained now, but there's significant damage to the east wing." "Was anyone hurt?" "No, thank God. My housekeeper and cook are safe, but the sheriff suspects it wasn't an accident." Charlotte lowered her voice. "He believes it may have been the Blackwater gang, retaliating because George once testified against Jake Blackwater's brother in a mining dispute." Catherine frowned. "But that seems so long ago." "These frontier feuds can simmer for years," Charlotte replied grimly. "In any case, I must return to assess the damage and make arrangements for repairs." She clasped Catherine's hands. "I'm sorry to cut short your recovery here, but I need your help. My arthritis makes it difficult to manage such matters alone." Torn between her duty to her aunt and her reluctance to leave Triple Creek and Wyatt so abruptly, Catherine hesitated. "Of course I'll help. But is it safe to travel if the gang might be targeting you?" "Sheriff Taylor has provided an armed escort," Charlotte explained, gesturing toward two deputies visible through the window. "And Mr. Vance has generously offered to accompany us as well." Catherine turned to find Wyatt in the doorway. "You're coming to Oro Grande." "If you'll have me," he replied. "Mr. Reed would want me to ensure your safe arrival, especially under these circumstances." The relief Catherine felt at not having to say goodbye so soon was tempered by concern for her aunt's situation. Within the hour, their belongings were packed, farewells said to Mrs. Holbrook and the ranch hands, and the small party set out for Oro Grande. The journey passed without incident, though Catherine noticed how vigilantly Wyatt and the deputies scanned the landscape as they traveled. By mid-afternoon, they crested a hill to see Oro Grande spread before them, a bustling town nestled at the base of copper-colored mountains that explained its name. Even from a distance, Catherine could see it was more developed than she had expected. Several substantial stone and brick buildings lined the main street, alongside the wooden structures more typical of frontier towns. Church spires and the dome of what appeared to be a courthouse rose above the surrounding rooftops. Oro Grande was established in 1859 after silver was discovered in these mountains, Charlotte explained, seeing Catherine's interest. The mines brought wealth and with it civilization, We have a proper hotel, a school, 2 churches, and even a small theater for traveling shows." As they entered the town, Catherine observed the mix of residents going about their business, miners in work clothes, merchants in more formal attire, women in everything from practical frontier dress to surprisingly fashionable ensembles. The diversity surprised her. Alongside white settlers were Mexican families, Chinese merchants, and even a few well-dressed black businessmen. "The silver doesn't care who digs it up," Charlotte commented, following Catherine's gaze. "Oro Grande has always been more concerned with industry than ancestry, though prejudices exist here as everywhere." The stagecoach turned onto a tree-lined street of substantial homes, finally stopping before a large 2-story house of locally quarried stone. Even with one wing showing obvious fire damage, Charlotte's home remained impressive, a testament to her late husband's success. Inside, the house revealed a curious blend of Eastern refinement and Western practicality. Fine carpets covered hardwood floors, quality furniture filled the rooms, and artwork adorned the walls, yet the windows were larger than Boston fashion would dictate, designed to capture breezes in the desert heat, and the layout favored open spaces over the compartmentalized rooms of Eastern homes. "This will be your room," Charlotte said, leading Catherine to a pleasant chamber overlooking a small garden. "I had it prepared months ago, though we'll need to air it thoroughly after the smoke." The smoke damage was evident throughout the house, though the fire itself had been contained to what had been George Davis's study and the guest room above it. As Charlotte consulted with the sheriff and the local carpenter about repairs, Catherine found herself gravitating toward Wyatt, who stood somewhat awkwardly in the parlor, hat in hand. "Thank you for escorting us," she said softly. "It was no hardship," he replied with a small smile. "Though I confess I'm not entirely sure of my next step. I should return to Triple Creek, but—" He glanced toward the street where reports of the Blackwater gang's activities still had the town on edge. "You're concerned about our safety," Catherine finished for him. "Yes." Wyatt's direct gaze held hers. The sheriff's deputies can't remain indefinitely, and if Charlotte was indeed targeted because of an old grievance, Catherine touched his arm lightly. "Stay then, at least until we know more." "I couldn't impose, you wouldn't be," Charlotte interrupted, entering the room with the sheriff. "In fact, I was about to suggest the same. Mr. Vance, we have a carriage house with comfortable quarters above. It would ease my mind considerably to have someone of your capabilities nearby until this situation is resolved." Sheriff Taylor nodded his agreement. "I'd consider it a personal favor, Vance. My deputies are stretched thin with the increased robberies along the stage routes." "Then I accept," Wyatt said, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face. "I'll send word to Triple Creek that my return will be delayed." That evening, after a simple meal prepared by Charlotte's cook, who had insisted on returning to work despite the fire damage, Catherine found a moment alone with her aunt in the parlor. "Thank you for inviting Wyatt to stay," she said, her hands busy with needlework though her thoughts were elsewhere. Charlotte regarded her niece with knowing eyes. "I may be old, Catherine, but I'm not blind. There's something growing between you and Mr. Vance." She set aside her own embroidery with a sigh. "I meant what I said about the challenges of territory life, but I wouldn't stand in the way of your happiness." Surprised by her aunt's understanding, Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "I hardly know what to think. Everything has happened so quickly." "The heart doesn't always keep pace with the calendar," Charlotte said gently. "Your mother knew after 3 weeks that your father was the only man for her, despite our parents' objections to his modest circumstances." "I didn't know that," Catherine said, realizing how little she knew of her mother, who had died when she was just 10 years old. Clara was always certain of her own mind. Charlotte's smile held old grief and fond remembrance in equal measure. "You remind me of her in that way." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Moments later, the housekeeper ushered in Sheriff Taylor, his expression grave. "Mrs. Davis, Miss Thomas," he greeted them, declining Charlotte's offer to sit. "I'm afraid I have troubling news. One of my deputies spotted Jake Blackwater himself in town this afternoon, watching this house." Catherine felt a chill run through her. "What does that mean?" "It means we need to take the threat seriously," Taylor replied. I've stationed a deputy outside for tonight and I'll increase patrols in this neighborhood, but I recommend you both exercise extreme caution. Should we leave town? Charlotte asked, her composure slipping for the first time since Catherine had met her. The sheriff shook his head. Running might provoke them further. Better to stay where we can protect you. He glanced toward the window. Where's Vance? Checking the property boundaries before dark, Catherine answered, a new fear clutching at her heart. Should I call him in? No need. I'll find him on my way out. Taylor adjusted his gun belt. Lock your doors and windows tonight, ladies, and keep a lamp burning. After the sheriff departed, a tense silence filled the room. Charlotte finally broke it with a forced laugh. Well, this isn't quite the welcome to Oro Grande I had planned for you. Life rarely follows our plans, Catherine replied, thinking of the stagecoach accident that had so drastically altered her journey. But we adapt. Later that night, Catherine stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the shadowy garden below. A figure moved in the darkness, Wyatt, making another circuit of the property. The knowledge that he was watching over them brought her comfort, even as she worried about the danger he might face on their behalf. As if sensing her gaze, he paused and looked up. Their eyes met across the distance, and he lifted a hand in silent reassurance. Catherine returned the gesture, then reluctantly closed her curtains and prepared for bed, the day's events swirling in her mind until exhaustion finally claimed her. The next morning brought unwelcome news. Sheriff Taylor arrived early, his expression grim, to report that the deputy stationed outside overnight had been attacked, beaten unconscious, and left in the alley behind the house. Though alive, his condition was serious. This is a direct message, Taylor said bluntly. Blackwater wants you to know he can get to you. Charlotte paled but maintained her composure. What do you suggest, Sheriff? I've telegraphed for additional lawmen from Tucson, but they won't arrive for at least 2 days. Taylor hesitated. In the meantime, I think you should consider relocating to the hotel in town. It's easier to secure and there are more people around. Absolutely not, Charlotte declared firmly. I will not be driven from my home by criminals. George built this house for us and I intend to stay in it. Catherine admired her aunt's courage even as she questioned the wisdom of her stance. Perhaps we could compromise, she suggested. Stay here during the day when visibility is better, but spend nights at the hotel until the danger passes. After some debate, this plan was reluctantly agreed upon. Wyatt, who had been silent during the discussion, finally spoke. With your permission, Mrs. Davis, I'd like to bring in some additional men from Triple Creek, ranch hands I trust who know how to handle themselves in a fight. Taylor nodded approvingly. That's not a bad idea. The more eyes we have watching, the better. Do what you must, Mr. Vance, Charlotte conceded, though I hate involving others in my troubles. Wyatt's gaze shifted to Catherine. Some troubles are worth sharing. The day passed in tense preparation. Wyatt rode to the telegraph office to send for reinforcements from Triple Creek, while Catherine and Charlotte inventoried what valuables should be moved to the bank vault for safekeeping. The carpenter came to board up the damaged wing of the house, and Charlotte's cook prepared simple food that could be packed and taken to the hotel that evening. As dusk approached, Catherine retreated to her room to pack an overnight bag. Lost in thought, she didn't hear the soft footsteps in the hallway until her bedroom door crashed open, revealing a ragged-looking man with a wild beard and wilder eyes, a revolver clutched in his dirty hand. "Don't scream," he growled, "or I'll put a bullet in that pretty head." Terror froze Catherine in place. "What do you want?" she managed to ask, her voice barely audible. "You're coming with me." The man gestured with his gun. "Jake wants to have a little chat with Mrs. Davis and you're going to be our invitation. Jake Blackwater." Catherine's mind raced, searching for options for time, the one and only. The intruder grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Now move nice and quiet-like." Catherine's gaze darted to the window. Could Wyatt see what was happening? Would her aunt hear if she screamed despite the threat? The man seemed to read her thoughts. "Your cowboy protector is busy out back," he sneered. "One of my boys is keeping him occupied, and the old lady's cook dropped a little something in her tea. She'll be sleeping sound for another hour at least." Cold dread settled in Catherine's stomach. Seeing no immediate alternative, she moved toward the door as instructed, praying for an opportunity to escape or alert someone. The intruder grabbed her arm roughly, pressing the gun to her side as he forced her down the back stairs and out through the kitchen. A horse waited in the alley, and with shocking strength, he lifted Catherine and threw her across the saddle before mounting behind her. "One sound," he warned, "and it'll be your last." They rode at a punishing pace through back streets and finally out of town, heading toward the foothills that ringed Oro Grande to the west. Catherine tried to memorize their route, though the fading light and her precarious position made it difficult. After what felt like hours but was likely less than one, they approached a dilapidated mining cabin half hidden in a stand of scrub oak. Inside, 3 other men looked up from a card game as Catherine was pushed through the door. One rose slowly, a tall, lean man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow and cold eyes that assessed her with calculating precision. "Jake Blackwater, I presume," Catherine said, summoning every ounce of courage she possessed. "My reputation precedes me," he replied with a mocking bow. "And you must be the niece." Catherine Thomas, newly arrived from Boston. His knowledge of her identity sent a fresh wave of fear through her. "What do you want with me?" Jake gestured to a rough wooden chair. "Sit. We're going to compose a letter to your dear aunt. She has something that belongs to me, and you're going to help me get it back." "I don't understand," Catherine said as she reluctantly took the seat. "What could my aunt possibly have that you want?" "A map," Jake replied, his voice hardening. "George Davis discovered a new silver vein before he died. The richest strike in the territory, according to my sources. He had it all mapped out but kept it secret, waiting for the right investors." He leaned closer, his breath hot on her face. "That map is worth a fortune, and it's rightfully mine." "How could it possibly be yours?" Catherine challenged, stalling for time, hoping desperately that Wyatt had discovered her absence by now. Jake straightened, a strange smile playing on his lips. "Because George Davis stole the information from my brother before testifying against him. Got him hanged for a murder he didn't commit, all to protect his precious silver claim." Catherine doubted this version of events, but knew arguing would only anger her captor. "I know nothing about any map." "Neither does my aunt, I'm sure of it. We'll see about that." Jake nodded to one of his men who brought paper, pen, and ink. "You're going to write exactly what I tell you. Tell your aunt she has until dawn to bring the map to Hangman's Draw, alone, or she'll never see you alive again." With trembling hands, Catherine penned the note as dictated. As she finished, the cabin door burst open and the man who had been standing guard outside stumbled in. "Riders coming," he gasped. "At least 6 of them, moving fast." Jake cursed, grabbing the note from Catherine's hand. "Change of plans. Mount up. We're moving to the old Gonzales mine." He seized Catherine's arm, dragging her toward the door. "You're still our ticket, Boston girl." Outside, Catherine could hear the distant thunder of approaching horses. As Jake forced her onto his mount, she made a split-second decision. Drawing a deep breath, she screamed as loudly as she could, a piercing sound that echoed through the hills. Jake's hand cracked across her face, but it was too late. The approaching riders had heard. With a savage oath, he kicked his horse into a gallop. One arm locked around Catherine's waist as they plunged deeper into the foothills, the rest of the gang close behind. The jolting pace and awkward position made it impossible for Catherine to attempt escape. Darkness had fallen completely now, with only a sliver of moon to illuminate the treacherous terrain. She could hear their pursuers, gaining ground despite the head start, and found herself praying that Wyatt was among them. Suddenly, gunfire erupted behind them. Jake swerved sharply, taking them behind an outcropping of rock. The other gang members scattered, returning fire as they sought cover. "This is your fault," Jake hissed in Catherine's ear, yanking her from the horse and dragging her toward a narrow ravine. "Now we do this the hard way." Stumbling over loose rocks in the darkness, Catherine fought to keep her footing as Jake pulled her deeper into the ravine. Behind them, the gunfight continued, sporadic shots and shouted commands echoing off the canyon walls. They emerged into a small box canyon with sheer walls on 3 sides. Jake pushed Catherine roughly against the rock face, drawing his revolver. "End of the line," he said coldly. "Either I walk out of here with what I want, or nobody walks out." "Catherine," Wyatt's voice carried clearly from the ravine entrance, sending a surge of hope through her heart. "Wyatt." She called back before Jake's hand clamped over her mouth. "One step closer, cowboy, and she dies," Jake shouted, pressing the gun to Catherine's temple. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of a single pair of boots approaching slowly. Wyatt appeared at the canyon entrance, his hands raised, his own revolver holstered. "Let her go, Blackwater," he said, his voice steady despite the fear Catherine could see in his eyes. "This is between you and the Davis family. She's innocent in all this." Jake laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Nobody's innocent, but I'm a reasonable man. You tell Charlotte Davis to bring the map to the North Ridge by sunrise, and maybe, just maybe, her niece lives to see another day." "There is no map," Wyatt replied, taking a careful step forward. "Charlotte has searched the house since the fire. Whatever George might have had, it's gone." "You're lying." Jake's grip on Catherine tightened painfully. "He had it. My brother saw it before Davis set him up." "Your brother was a murderer who killed 3 minors in a claim dispute," Wyatt said, his tone hardening. "George Davis testified to what he witnessed. There was no conspiracy, no secret map." Jake's composure cracked. "Shut up, you don't know anything." The gun at Catherine's temple trembled slightly, a dangerous instability that terrified her more than his earlier cold control. Wyatt took another measured step. "Let Catherine go and you can ride away. The sheriff's men are dealing with your gang. It's just you and me now." For a fraction of a second, Jake's attention wavered, his eyes flicking toward the ravine entrance. It was all the opening Catherine needed. Remembering her father's insistence that she learn basic self-defense after a rash of attacks on women in Boston, she brought her heel down hard on Jake's instep, while simultaneously driving her elbow back into his solar plexus. The unexpected attack loosened his grip just enough. Catherine tore free, diving to the side as Jake howled in rage and pain. His revolver discharged, the bullet ricocheting off the canyon wall as Wyatt launched himself forward. The 2 men collided with bone-jarring force. Despite Jake's desperation, Wyatt's superior strength and training quickly gave him the advantage. Within moments, he had disarmed the outlaw and pinned him face down on the rocky ground. "Catherine," Wyatt called urgently, "are you hurt?" "No," she managed, though her voice shook. "I'm all right." The sound of multiple riders approaching echoed through the ravine. Sheriff Taylor appeared, followed by several deputies and men Catherine recognized from Triple Creek. "Vance, you got him," Taylor exclaimed, dismounting quickly. "And Miss Thomas, thank God you're safe." As the lawman secured Jake Blackwater, Wyatt crossed to Catherine, his hands gentle as they framed her face, examining the bruise forming where Jake had struck her. "I thought I'd lost you," he said quietly, his voice raw with emotion. Catherine leaned into his touch, the shock of the ordeal finally catching up with her. "How did you find me so quickly?" "I saw him taking you from the house," Wyatt explained. "I was too far away to stop him, but close enough to see which direction you headed." The Triple Creek men had just arrived in town. It was the luckiest timing imaginable. Sheriff Taylor joined them, offering Catherine his canteen. "Mrs. Davis is beside herself with worry. We should get you back to town right away." The ride back to Oro Grande passed in a blur. Catherine rode with Wyatt, secure in his embrace, too exhausted to do more than lean against his solid warmth. At Charlotte's house, her aunt was waiting on the porch, her face white with fear until she saw Catherine safe. "Oh, my dear girl." Charlotte cried, gathering Catherine in her arms the moment Wyatt helped her dismount. "When I woke and found you gone." She trailed off, overcome with emotion. The next hours were consumed with explanations. A doctor's examination that confirmed Catherine had suffered no serious injury, and Sheriff Taylor's detailed report of the Blackwater gang's capture. Jake and his men would be transferred to Tucson to stand trial for multiple charges of robbery, arson, assault, and kidnapping. "What about the map he was so convinced existed?" Catherine asked as they gathered in Charlotte's parlor, the clock on the mantel showing nearly midnight. Charlotte sighed heavily. There was a map. George did discover a new silver vein shortly before his death, but it wasn't some grand conspiracy. He simply hadn't filed the claim yet. He was waiting for the assay results. "So where is this map now?" Wyatt asked. "Destroyed in the fire, I believe," Charlotte replied. "George kept it in his desk in the study. I looked for it after his death but never found it. I assumed he'd placed it in his bank box, but it wasn't there either." Sheriff Taylor shook his head wearily. "So all this violence and for nothing." "Not nothing," Catherine said softly, her gaze finding Wyatt's across the room. "I'm alive because of it. Later, as the house finally quieted, Catherine found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. The events of the day replayed in her mind, particularly the moment when she'd looked up to see Wyatt framed in the canyon entrance, risking his life to save hers. A soft tap at her bedroom door startled her from her thoughts. Opening it, she found Wyatt standing in the hallway, his expression troubled. "I couldn't sleep," he explained, his voice low to avoid waking Charlotte. "Needed to make sure you were truly safe." Catherine stepped back, inviting him to enter a scandalous breach of propriety under normal circumstances, but after the day's events, social conventions seemed trivial. "I keep seeing his face," she admitted, wrapping her dressing gown more tightly around herself as she moved to the window. "Feeling the gun against my head." Wyatt remained near the door, respecting her space even now. "The fear will fade with time," he said gently. "Though the memory never disappears completely." Catherine turned to face him, struck by the understanding in his voice. "You speak from experience." A shadow crossed his features. "The war, and after when I rode with a U.S. Marshal for a time before settling into ranch work." He hesitated, then added, "There are nights when the past feels more real than the present." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep within Catherine. "Then we'll face our ghosts together," she said simply. The words hung between them, laden with meaning beyond the immediate comfort they offered. Wyatt took a step toward her, then stopped, uncertainty replacing his usual confidence. "Catherine," he began, then faltered. Drawing a deep breath, he tried again. "I know it's too soon. We've known each other barely 2 weeks, but today when I thought I might lose you." He shook his head, struggling to find the right words. "I felt it too," Catherine said softly, crossing the room to stand before him. "When I saw you in that canyon, I knew with absolute certainty that you were the one person in all the world I couldn't bear to lose." The last of Wyatt's hesitation dissolved. He took her hands in his touch gentle yet grounding. "I love you, Catherine Thomas. I can't offer you the life you knew in Boston, only a foreman's cabin on Triple Creek Ranch, hard work, and an uncertain future. But I swear I would spend every day trying to make you happy." Tears welled in Catherine's eyes, not of sorrow but of overwhelming joy. "When I left Boston, I thought I was leaving everything behind. I never imagined I might be traveling toward everything that truly matters." She squeezed his hands. "I love you too, Wyatt Vance, and I would rather share a simple life with you than a mansion with anyone else." Wyatt's kiss was tender at first, then deepened with the intensity of emotions too powerful to contain. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he whispered, "before I forget myself entirely." Catherine nodded reluctantly. "Will you speak to my aunt tomorrow? First thing in the morning," Wyatt promised. "Though after today's events, I suspect she already knows my intentions." With one last kiss, Wyatt departed, leaving Catherine standing in the moonlight that streamed through her window. For the first time since her father's death, she felt not adrift, but anchored, not lost, but found. The following weeks brought dramatic changes to Catherine's new life in the Arizona territory. True to his word, Wyatt approached Charlotte the morning after the kidnapping to formally request permission to court Catherine. To their mutual surprise, Charlotte not only gave her blessing but suggested that perhaps a longer engagement wasn't necessary under the circumstances. "Life is precarious out here," she observed with the practical wisdom of a frontier widow. "When you find happiness, you'd be foolish to postpone it." Repairs to the fire-damaged wing of Charlotte's home progressed steadily, the community rallying to help the respected widow and her niece. Catherine discovered that frontier society, while lacking the polish of Boston's elite circles, possessed a genuine warmth and generosity that transcended social distinctions. She also found herself unexpectedly useful in Oro Grande. When the schoolteacher fell ill, Catherine volunteered to substitute, drawing on her experience tutoring in Boston. What was meant to be a temporary arrangement became permanent when the teacher decided to relocate to California for her health, and the town council offered Catherine the position. It would mean staying in Oro Grande rather than moving to Triple Creek right away, she explained to Wyatt as they walked arm in arm down the main street one crisp November afternoon. Wyatt considered this thoughtfully. "The ride between town and the ranch isn't so far. And we could build a home halfway between, perhaps on that rise overlooking the valley." his eyes lit with enthusiasm. "There's good water there, enough land for a small herd of my own. Mr. Reed has offered to help me establish a breeding operation for quality horses as a side business." Catherine's heart swelled at how readily he adjusted their plans to accommodate her newfound purpose. "You wouldn't mind waiting a little longer? For you," Wyatt smiled down at her. "I'd wait forever if needed, but I was rather hoping we might be married before Christmas." The simple declaration sent a thrill through Catherine. "Christmas," she repeated. "Yes, I think that would be perfect." As the weeks passed, Catherine divided her time between teaching, helping Charlotte with the final repairs to the house, and planning for a modest December wedding. Wyatt traveled between Oro Grande and Triple Creek, overseeing his regular duties while also scouting and purchasing land for their future home. In late November, a letter arrived from Daniel Reed, the owner of Triple Creek Ranch, who had been in Tucson on business throughout the tumultuous events. "Mr. Reed is returning next week," Wyatt announced one evening as he joined Catherine and Charlotte for supper. "He sends his congratulations on our engagement and insists on hosting the wedding at Triple Creek." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "That's a generous offer." "I had assumed we'd have a small ceremony at the church here in town. He feels responsible for bringing us together," Wyatt explained with a wry smile. "Says finding Catherine was the best thing that ever happened on his property." Catherine laughed. "I'm not sure nearly dying of thirst qualifies as a romantic beginning, but I can't argue with the outcome." As the conversation continued, Catherine noticed an unexpected flush on her aunt's cheeks when Daniel Reed's name was mentioned. Later, when Wyatt had departed for the night, she gently probed this observation. "You and Mr. Reed seem well acquainted," she ventured as she and Charlotte sat in the parlor with their evening tea, Charlotte's hands stilled on her needlework. "Daniel and George were partners in the early days before the mines proved profitable, after George died." She paused, her gaze distant. "Daniel was very kind. He helped me navigate the legal complications of the estate." "You seem fond of him," Catherine observed carefully. A small, wistful smile touched Charlotte's lips. "We are old friends, nothing more. I had my great love with George." Catherine sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. Instead, she said simply, "I look forward to meeting him." Daniel Reed arrived in Oro Grande the following week, and Catherine's first impression was of a man who commanded respect without demanding it. In his mid-50s, with silver threading his dark hair and lines of both laughter and hardship etched into his tanned face, he greeted Catherine with genuine warmth. "Miss Thomas," he said, clasping her hand in both of his. "I can't tell you how pleased I am to finally meet the woman who's captured Wyatt's heart. He's like a son to me, and I've never seen him happier." "Thank you for your hospitality during my recovery," Catherine replied, "and for your generous offer to host our wedding." "It's the least I can do," Reed assured her. "Triple Creek has never hosted a celebration of this magnitude. It's about time those walls witnessed some joy." Later that evening, Catherine couldn't help noticing how Reed's attention seemed to linger on Charlotte, and how her normally composed aunt became almost girlishly animated in his presence. When Wyatt escorted Catherine home after dinner at the hotel, she shared her observations. "I think perhaps your aunt and Mr. Reed share more than just a business connection," she suggested as they walked slowly beneath the star-filled sky. Wyatt nodded thoughtfully. "I've suspected as much for some time. Reed keeps a photograph on his desk, a younger Charlotte with George Davis. But it's always struck me that his gaze lingers more on Charlotte than on his former partner. Do you think they might?" Catherine left the question unfinished. "Find happiness together," Wyatt completed her thought. "I hope so. They're both good people who have known their share of sorrow." As the December wedding approached, preparations intensified. Charlotte insisted on ordering fabric from Tucson for Catherine's wedding dress, while Mrs. Holbrook at Triple Creek supervised the transformation of the ranch's great room into a suitable venue for the ceremony and celebration. Catherine's days were full with teaching and preparations, but she treasured the quiet moments with Wyatt riding along the creek that had given Triple Creek its name, visiting the land they had purchased for their future home, planning the life they would build together. 2 days before the wedding, Daniel Reed arrived at Charlotte's house with an unexpected proposal. "I've been considering the future of Triple Creek," he explained as they gathered in the parlor after dinner. I'm not getting any younger, and I've been thinking about scaling back my involvement in the day-to-day operations. Wyatt straightened in his chair. Mr. Reed, if this is about my new responsibilities, Reed raised a hand to stop him. It's not that, Wyatt. You've been an exceptional foreman, and I have complete faith in your abilities. He glanced at Charlotte, who nodded encouragingly. What I'm proposing is a partnership. I want to offer you and Catherine a quarter ownership in Triple Creek, with the opportunity to increase your stake over time. Stunned, Catherine looked to Wyatt, whose expression mirrored her own shock. That's incredibly generous, Wyatt finally managed, but we couldn't possibly. You can and you should, Reed insisted. I have no children, no family to leave my legacy to. You've put your heart and soul into that ranch for 5 years, Wyatt. You know every inch of it, every head of cattle, every issue and opportunity. Charlotte leaned forward, adding her support. Daniel and I have discussed this at length. It makes perfect sense from a business perspective, not just a personal one. The implications slowly sank in. This wasn't merely a gift, it was a future, a foundation for generations to come. We would be honored, Catherine said softly, squeezing Wyatt's hand. Truly honored. Reed smiled, relief evident in his features. Excellent, we'll formalize everything after the wedding. He hesitated, then added, there's one more thing. Charlotte and I have an announcement of our own. Charlotte rose to stand beside Daniel, her cheeks flushed but her expression serene. Daniel has asked me to marry him, and I have accepted. The joy that filled the room at this revelation was palpable. As Catherine embraced her aunt, tears of happiness welling in her eyes, she marveled at how life could change so dramatically in such a short time. From the desperate, dying woman Wyatt had found in the desert to this moment of pure joy, the journey seemed almost impossible to comprehend. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, the December sky a brilliant blue above Triple Creek Ranch. Catherine stood at the window of the guest room where she was preparing, watching ranch hands and townspeople arriving for the celebration. A knock at the door announced Charlotte, who entered carrying a small wooden box. I have something for you, she said, setting the box on the dressing table. It belonged to your mother. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, lay a delicate pearl pendant on a silver chain. She wore this on her wedding day, Charlotte explained, lifting it carefully. Clara would want you to have it. As Charlotte fastened the necklace around Catherine's neck, their eyes met in the mirror 2 generations of Thomas women, their lives unfolding in ways neither could have predicted. Are you happy, truly happy with your new life here? Charlotte asked softly. Catherine touched the pendant, feeling a connection to the mother she had lost too young. More than I ever thought possible, she answered with complete sincerity. When Father died, I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was just beginning. The ceremony itself was simple but beautiful. The great room of Triple Creek Ranch had been transformed with evergreen boughs, winter berries, and dozens of candles. Mrs. Holbrook had outdone herself with the preparations, and the ranch hands had constructed a wedding arch framed with twisted branches and dried wildflowers. Standing before the local minister with Wyatt's strong hands holding hers, Catherine felt a profound sense of rightness. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through all the challenges and joys that frontier life might bring, she saw in Wyatt's storm-gray eyes the same certainty she felt in her heart. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister declared. Mr. Vance, you may kiss your bride. Wyatt's kiss was tender yet possessive, a promise and a claim all at once. As they turned to face their guests, Charlotte and Daniel, the ranch hands who had become friends, the townspeople of Oro Grande who had welcomed Catherine into their community, applause and cheers filled the room. The celebration continued long into the night, with feasting, dancing, and much laughter. When at last the newlyweds departed for the foreman's cabin that would be their temporary home until their own house was built, Catherine felt a curious mixture of excitement and peace. Welcome home, Mrs. Vance, Wyatt said softly as he carried her across the threshold of the simple but comfortable cabin. Home, Catherine repeated, the word taking on new meaning. No longer the lost Boston socialite, no longer the desperate woman wandering the desert without water or hope, she was Catherine Vance now. A teacher, a rancher's wife, a woman who had found her place in the vast, beautiful harshness of the Arizona territory. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Wyatt's arms a protective circle around her, Catherine whispered, "Do you remember what you said when you found me in the desert? Small sips, or you'll make yourself sick." She felt rather than saw his smile. "I remember." "I think that's how happiness works too," she mused. "Too much at once and you can't absorb it properly, but day by day, sip by sip, it sustains you." Wyatt drew her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Then here's to a lifetime of small sips, my love. And occasional deep drafts when the moment calls for it." As spring arrived, bringing new growth to the desert landscape, Catherine and Wyatt settled into the rhythm of their shared life. Their house on the ridge between Triple Creek and Oro Grande took shape, a sturdy structure built with the help of ranch hands and townspeople alike, designed to withstand both the harsh elements and the passage of time. Catherine continued teaching at the Oro Grande School, finding deep satisfaction in helping children of miners, ranchers, and merchants discover the joy of learning. Wyatt divided his time between Triple Creek's operations and developing their own small herd of cattle and horses, his expertise already drawing buyers from as far away as California. In April, Charlotte and Daniel were married in a quiet ceremony at the Oro Grande Church, beginning a new chapter in both their lives. They planned to divide their time between Charlotte's home in town and Triple Creek Ranch, with Daniel gradually transferring more of the ranch's daily management to Wyatt. By June, Catherine and Wyatt's house was complete enough for them to move in, though Wyatt continued to add improvements as time allowed. Standing on their porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Catherine felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. "What is it?" Wyatt asked, noticing her emotion as he joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "I was just thinking about how different my life is from what I imagined a year ago," she explained, leaning against his solid warmth. "How close I came to never experiencing any of this." Wyatt's arm tightened around her. "I still dream about it sometimes, finding you in the desert, not knowing if you would survive." "But I did survive," Catherine reminded him gently. "Because of you." "Because you're the strongest woman I've ever known," Wyatt countered. "You saved yourself in that canyon with Blackwater. And you've built a life here that amazes me every day." Catherine turned in his embrace, a smile playing on her lips. "Speaking of building a life," she said, taking his hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach, "we should probably add another bedroom to the house before winter." Wyatt's expression transformed from confusion to wonder as her meaning registered. "Catherine," he breathed. "Are you certain Dr. Harrison confirmed it yesterday?" she replied, laughing as Wyatt lifted her off her feet in a joyful embrace. "A baby," he marveled, setting her gently back down. "Our baby." As twilight deepened around them, Catherine thought again of that desperate day in the desert, parched, lost, certain of death. How could she have known then that the cowboy who shared his canteen would also share his future? That from the brink of death would come not just life, but love and family and purpose. "Small sips," she murmured, echoing their wedding night conversation as Wyatt's hand remained protectively over their unborn child. "A lifetime of them," Wyatt agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss as the first stars appeared in the vast Arizona sky, a sky that had once seemed so threatening but now felt like a sheltering canopy over the life they were building together. In February of 1878, as winter's grip on the territory began to loosen, Catherine gave birth to a son. They named him James after Wyatt's father, with George as his middle name in honor of Charlotte's late husband. The baby had Wyatt's storm gray eyes and a shock of dark hair that Catherine insisted came from her father's side. "He's perfect," Charlotte declared, holding her great-nephew with practiced ease. She and Daniel had become fixtures in Catherine and Wyatt's home during the final weeks of her pregnancy, providing support and wisdom from their own experiences. As spring blossomed into summer, Catherine adjusted to the delicate balance of motherhood, teaching, and ranch life. When the school term ended in May, she decided to take a year away from formal teaching to focus on James and the ranch, though she continued to tutor several older students who were preparing for college examinations. The partnership with Daniel Reed flourished, with Triple Creek expanding its operations to include a successful horse breeding program under Wyatt's expert guidance. By the time James celebrated his first birthday, the Vances had increased their ownership stake to 1/3 of the ranch. Life settled into a pattern of productive days and peaceful nights, the challenges of frontier existence balanced by the deep satisfactions of building something meaningful together. The Blackwater Gang's reign of terror became a distant memory as Jake served his sentence in the territorial prison and his followers scattered to avoid similar fates. When James was 2, Catherine discovered she was expecting again. The pregnancy progressed smoothly until late August, when she went into labor 6 weeks earlier than expected. The long, difficult birth tested both Catherine's strength and Wyatt's faith, but by morning, their daughter had arrived tiny but determined, with a lusty cry that belied her small size. "Clara," Catherine whispered when they placed the swaddled infant in her arms. "Clara Charlotte Vance." "Perfect," Wyatt agreed, his voice rough with emotion as he sat beside them on the bed, one arm supporting Catherine while the other hand gently stroked their daughter's downy head. As the years passed, the Vance family thrived alongside Triple Creek Ranch. James grew into a thoughtful boy with his father's affinity for horses and his mother's love of books. Clara, despite her early arrival, developed into a spirited child whose determination and curiosity kept her parents constantly on their toes. By 1885, Catherine and Wyatt had become equal partners with Daniel Reed in Triple Creek's operations, their shared vision expanding the ranch's influence throughout the territory. When Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Wyatt was among the prominent ranchers invited to Phoenix for the celebrations, a far cry from the solitary cowboy who had once wandered the desert searching for stray cattle. Through all the changes, through the inevitable hardships and joys of frontier life, the memory of their beginning remained a touchstone for Catherine and Wyatt. Each year on the anniversary of the day he had found her in the desert, they would ride together to Triple Creek, to sit beside the water and remember. "I still can't believe how close I came to losing you before I even knew you," Wyatt would say, his hair gradually silvering but his eyes still the same stormy gray that had first captured Catherine's heart. "Perhaps that's why we've never taken our time together for granted," Catherine would reply, her hand finding his with the ease of long practice. And as they watched their children and eventually grandchildren grow and thrive on the land they had come to love so deeply, Catherine often thought of that desperate day when she had been lost without water, without hope. How strange and wonderful that from such desperate beginnings could grow a life so rich, so full. From small sips to sustain life, to a wellspring of love that nourished generations, this was the legacy they built together. The cowboy who had shared his canteen and the woman who had found not just water, but home.